Tommy? Welcome you all to our two sessions that I'm going to lead about Jews in the city. Now we are going to the part one, and after that it will be part two. 6 very interesting lectures about this question, Jews in the city, within the theme of the workshop, the Jewish neighborhood in the Middle Ages. And we will take the questions afterwards, and I'm delighted to invite Dr. Josef Lifshitz, my colleague from the center. He is a fellow at our Goldin Diaspora Research Center and a senior lecturer at the Shalem College, Jerusalem. His book, which we are all hoping to read in the near present, on the political theory of Maharam of Rothenburg, will be published by the Cambridge University Press. It's coming on November. He's going to talk about aesthetics in the Jewish urban setting viewed through rabbinic writings.
The subject is really theoretical, and I must say my interest in the question of aesthetics started from an article I wrote several years ago about the aesthetics of war. It had nothing to do with history, just a theoretical question about the idea of the aesthetics and the way aesthetics serve other aspects in Jewish life. The article I wrote on aesthetics of war is much more theoretical. I'm not going to get today into all these deep theoretical questions. I will touch them lightly. The presentation is not that important. It's just a way to focus not on my beautiful face, but on a bit more aesthetical pictures. So forgive me for that. Okay, I'll start. One of the many methodologies of the study of history of the Jews in the Middle Ages are the study of halachic text. Jewish law or halacha relates to all aspects of life and therefore serves as a wonderful prism to history. Yet, such a study demands caution. Halacha is a body of knowledge that related directly to the elite, but not to the whole community. Moreover, it reflected an ideal and not necessarily praxis. In this paper, I'll present an example for the broad gap between halachic literature and actual history or actual life, and will attempt to bridge it. Again, my attempt is going to be work in progress, and I don't have any attempt to solve anything, but food for thought for future research. Based on many facts, we have no reason to believe that Jews in medieval Germany held a different view of aesthetics than their neighbors. Wealthy Jews decorated their walls with frescoes just like their contemporaries. We all know the pictures I'm going to show. This is the Rabbi Moshe of Zurich. Wealthy Jews decorated their walls and with frescoes like their contemporaries, as we can tell from the remains of the house of Rabbi Moshe from Zurich. The fact that Rabbi Moshe was not only a wealthy man, but also a prominent rabbinic figure, expresses a positive approach to aesthetics and does so better than any text can do. Unfortunately, although we don't have more examples like the house of Rabbi Moshe from Zurich, we have no reason to suspect that it was the exception. We do have testimonies about synagogues that were decorated richly. I can't have the picture here, but these are the remains, or the theoretical remains of the synagogue from Cologne. Again, I don't need to tell all of you that. We don't, as was described by Effie Shoham, these synagogues were decorated with dragons, lions, and snakes, as was the synagogue of Cologne. But we are not talking only about synagogues. Art historians are familiar with the wealth of book illuminations in Haggadot, Machzorim, and the like. Besides their expression, and those are also, as you all know, remains from Cologne. Despite the material culture of Ashkenazi Jews, which was not very different from that of their neighbors, yet one wishes to find out what the theoretical, or at least I am interested to find out what the theoretical concept of aesthetics was, or what the Ashkenazi rabbis thought about aesthetics in general. One is faced with void. There is almost no reference to beauty, to the aesthetics. I tried to cross-check aesthetics terms, the locution of rabbinic texts, such as words in Hebrew like chen, yofi, noi, hadar, ziv. There are many Hebrew expressions that are not to be found, almost, as I'm going to show. And I didn't come up with anything. I checked the Ashkenazi exegesis of the Bible, not only halachic texts, and the Talmud, and looked for material that deals in the Talmud with aesthetics, and was surprised to find out that there is almost nothing. Just to give you an example, there is a Mishnah in Avot that says anyone who studies the Torah and looks at nice birds and nice trees is sinning to the Jewish text. It's a negative expression of beauty. Even that did not bear any expression or any relation in Ashkenazi text. No exegesis that I was able to put my finger on. To judge by the text alone, one could conclude that the rabbis were either antagonistic to aesthetics or not at all interested. Needless to say, those philosophical discussions concerning beauty and aesthetics, it seems like philosophy did not interest the Ashkenazi rabbis at all in general. Questions regarding the essence of beauty, or what is beautiful, are lacking completely, unlike the Greek philosophers and Christian theologians, who were concerned about the beautiful. Jewish philosophers in general were oblivious to this subject, or to subject that did not focus on theology, ethics, or Jewish law. Ideas like beauty as the perfect, as in Plotinus, or the intentionality towards God, as in St. Augustine, or as in Thomas' complicated theory, are not to be found at all. Thomas Aquinas held that beauty is that whose appearance gives pleasure, but at the same time he claimed that beauty is the highest expression of the truth. Thus, he regarded beauty as always an abdominant of what is valued. While philosophers and Christian theologians debated such values as beauty, it seems as though their Jewish neighbors were oblivious to beauty as an expression of the word of the sages, on the phrase of the Bible, Yaft Elohim leyefet, may God enlarge Japhet. Give Yefet, Japheth, Yofi, beauty. However, I contend that this is a superficial reading of Ashkenazi sources, and that to claim that rabbis in Ashkenaz did not concern themselves with beauty and aesthetics will not constitute a true understanding of their expressions of beauty. There are two subjects in whom aesthetics plays an important role: the mystical world and the world of the mitzvot. Indeed, it seems as though Hasidei Ashkenaz, the German pietists, did not favor aesthetics. Sefer Hasidim, for instance, says that whoever rears birds for their beauty should be criticized because he wastes money that could have otherwise supported the poor. Even when it comes to decorating the Sefer Torah, for instance, he recommends, and I'll come back to it, he recommends displaying the nice side towards the parchment, not towards the viewer, not towards the observer. And he was not alone with with demanding this. Rabbi Simcha from Vitry, this is not exactly Ashkenaz, also had that beauty should be aimed towards God. When a person prays, he says, he should beautify himself in front of God. But I would like to claim that Ashkenazi sages were not hostile to beauty. Their perception of aesthetics was a glorification of aesthetics, and their idea of aesthetics was similar to that of Augustine, with some qualifications, as I'm going to say soon. I want to start with aesthetics as defining quality. The vast majority of work of Jewish art historians revolves around religious objects. They are concerned to mitzvot, kiddush goblets, light candles, prayer books like Haggadot, Machzorim, and Sidurim, and synagogues as well. Attributing aesthetics to religious objects didn't only express good taste, but reflected a religious obligation to beauty, to the mitzvot. As the Talmud says, or as the Bible says, "This is my God, and I enshrine him, Ze Eli ve'anvehu." The sages argued about the meaning of the verse, which is from the Song of Moses at the Red Sea. I'm going to read this passage from the Talmud. "This is my God, and I enshrine him. Enshrine thyself before him in the fulfillment of precepts. Thus, make a beautiful sukkah in his honor, a beautiful lulav, a beautiful shofar, a beautiful fringes, and a beautiful scroll of the law, and write it with a fine ink, with a reed pen, and a skillful penman, and wrap it with beautiful silks." This is one opinion. The other opinion says, Abba Shaul interpreted, "And I will be like him." Instead of saying beautify, I will be like him. Imitatio Dei, imitate God. Be thou like him, just as he is gracious and compassionate, so be thou gracious and compassionate. So the lesson is ethical, not of beauty. I'm going to skip this quote, but Maimonides preferred the latter opinion. He preferred ignoring the beautiful side of the mitzvot, but he preferred the ethical lesson. In Ashkenaz, it was the opposite. In contrast with Maimonides, the writer of Sefer Hasidim adopted an approach that favors aesthetics in mitzvot. He advised buying a nice case for the Torah and Tefillin. Although I mentioned before that he advises to wrap the wimple, the mappa, around the Torah with a beautiful site inside, but at the same time, yes, I'm ignoring my... here you can see the mappa, you can see the Sefer with... well, it's very difficult to look at this tiny thing, but thing that I have here... We have a Sefer here, yeah, it's a tiny one on top. Okay, we'll come to the next item soon. He advised buying a nice case for the Torah and Tefillin. Similarly, he advised a person who is blessed with a pleasant voice to use his voice and pray nicely and to beautify all the mitzvot. We'll learn later on in the book that the advice was a common understanding in Ashkenaz, so much so that the writer finds it necessary to warn against, which is not only the opinion of the writer of Sefer Hasidim, but he warns the people of Ashkenaz he find it necessary to warn against preferring aesthetics to the bare obligation. Some, he feared, prefer not to fulfill the mitzvot if they cannot find a beautiful object of mitzvah at all, if they will not to be pretty enough. Other sages, besides a writer of Sefer Hasidim such as Rabbeinu Tam, which is northern France, and Ravia, which is again Ashkenaz, also recommend beautifying the mitzvot, making sure that the mitzvot are beautiful. But unlike Sefer Hasidim, they did not think that the beauty should be geared towards the Sefer, should be internal. They thought that the observer should see pretty religious objects as well. Rabbeinu Tam even held that in the case of tefillin, unlike the case of Sefer Torah, we all know that inside the tefillin there is a written parchment. Rabbeinu Tam felt that it's not necessary to have nice written parchment inside the tefillin because nobody sees it. His idea as aesthetics was external, unlike Sefer Hasidim, who holds that it's internal. Such a dispute between external and internal idea of beauty might be behind the dispute between Rabbeinu Eliakim, which Efi Shoham presented yesterday, which I'm not going to argue against, of course, Efi, but I think that it's an addition to his theory. Ravan's father-in-law and Rabbeinu Ephraim from Bonn regarding decorations of the synagogue. Rabbeinu Eliakim ordered the drawings of lions and snakes removed from the walls of a Cologne synagogue, while Rabbeinu Ephraim permitted them. I must add that Rabbeinu Eliakim, wasn't alone in his prohibition. Rabbi Yitzchak from Vienna prohibited synagogue decoration as well, fearing that they might distract the mind of the worshippers away from the prayers. Again, smarter people beside me were talking about it yesterday. As I've shown elsewhere in this article on aesthetics of war, we beautify our objects for several reasons, and sometimes for practical reasons. We want to attract attention for social purposes or for sexual purposes, but those are not the only reasons. We don't always beautify. I'm going to go for the time I didn't measure it correctly. We don't always do it for practical reasons. An ugly vessel is not less useful than a pretty one. But what we don't like about the ugly is that we have difficulty associating ourselves with it. We want our house to look good and our clothes to look good because we identify with the beauty, and we want our surroundings to express ourselves. This is something that unfortunately men don't understand so well. But when women stand in front of the closet, making difficult decisions about which clothes to wear today, it's not only to look good, but that the clothes will express their psychology or their emotions. And when the man is honking downstairs, how long does it take you? It's a misunderstanding of the purpose of beauty. It is therefore interesting to find out that, I'm skipping one sentence, identity might be cultural, social, or religious. We saw a good example of aesthetics as cultural or social identity in the case of Rabbi Moshe from Zurich. It is therefore interesting to find out that, as opposed to the halachic decision of the Caesars in Spain, Provence, and France, in Ashkenaz, this wasn't any opposition to the adoption of non-Jewish design. The law of the Torah, you shall not copy the practice of the land of Egypt, where it dwelt, or of the land of Canaan, to which I'm taking you, and shall you follow their laws, was taken literally in other places, while in Ashkenaz it was restricted to the religious or the ethical. The adaptation of design of the non-Jews that did not express religious or ethical meanings was not prohibited. As Rabbi Eliezer from Metz declared, we shouldn't add to which the Talmud sages had already prohibited. As he wrote, only acts that express their Torah, the non-Jewish Torah, the religions of the Gentiles, as opposed to our Torah, are prohibited, and this prohibition shouldn't be extended any further. Indeed, we can find an expression to this ruling in Sefer Hasidim, where the writer prohibits singing of non-Jewish melodies. You can see the notes here, very, very few. I think that Sarit Shalaveni was presenting it in her paper in Paris. We can see some very, very sparse expression of music. So Sefer Hasidim was very zealot to the musical expression, but this expression proves the extent of this idea, where only music was their sensitivity to the exclusion of the Jewish aesthetics tradition, but did not apply to any other form of art. As I mentioned before, the use of expression of beauty in halachic literature is rather scarce, but that wasn't at all the case when it came to describe the holy. Rabbi Elazar from Worms described Metatron with a wealth of aesthetic expressions. Metatron is beautiful. He is glorious, but mainly shining. He shines so brightly that it dazzles everybody. Beauty, light, dazzle are attributed to God himself. And like God, the Shekhinah is also described as beautiful. These attributes, the wealth of expression of the beauty when it comes to the religious or to the sacred, these attributes are common in the writings of Rabbi Elazar from Worms, Rabbi Elazar Hadarshan, and others. If Ashkenazi sages did not attack religiosity did not attach religiosity to design, why did they attribute aesthetics terminology to the holy? The answer is that they didn't ascribe holiness to beauty itself as an objective attribute, but understood beauty as one of the objective attributes of the holy. The reason for making this distinction is their phenomenological perception of God. As I explained elsewhere, the Ashkenazi philosophy believed that there is a subjective perception of God, which is corporal and anthropological and anthropomorphic. And there is, I lost the last one. Okay, I'll conclude by heart. The idea is that as a subjective expression, there is no problem with using the aesthetics, as long as you don't attribute to beauty and a quality on itself. It's not the beauty or the aesthetic that deserve its own definition or its own holiness, but it's the holy that we use beauty or we use aesthetics to describe the holy. Therefore, beauty, aesthetics, is an expression, a subjective expression, but that does not have its own sanctity. So I think that the lack of use of aesthetics is not to give aesthetics its own space or its own to give the attribute, to give the aesthetics its own place or its own holiness, but just to give it a place of expression. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much about this very interesting lecture. The second lecturer is Dr. Micha Perry from Haifa University. He teaches medieval Jewish history at the Department of Jewish History at the University of Haifa, and his book, very interesting book, Tradition and Transformation, Knowledge and Transmission Among Medieval Jews, was published 5 years ago, very interesting book. And his current research is about the social history of Jews and languages in the Middle Ages, and I think that he is going to talk about this issue. Reḥov, Strasse, Mavoi, parallel and competing imaginary cartography in medieval Cologne.
Thank you very much, Simha, for this introduction and for the invitation. It's a pleasure being here. You'll see right away that my talk relates very strongly to Astrid's and Sophia's talks. Okay. Relatively little is known of the actual life of medieval Jews within the Christian city. The main sources are either Jewish or Christian law, in both cases portraying a wishful reality rather than an actual one. Some very few narratives, again representing stereotypes rather than reality, deeds of sale or inheritance, and archaeological evidence. Unfortunately, the two last types of sources, though being highly credible, are scarce. Nevertheless, mainly through the use of these sources, but without exclusion of others, this paper wishes to examine the Jewish languages of space. That is, the different languages Jews use to describe their abodes, and the ways different languages constructed different perceptions of space, even the same space. This is possible due to a combination of circumstances unique to the city of Cologne, and now I learned from Astrid that soon enough we'll have the same, maybe close results from Regensburg, maybe. And the city of Cologne, the first documented Jewish settlement north of the Alps, hold the Jewish real estate deeds of sale or inheritance known as the Judenschreinsbuch. And it was thoroughly excavated, once in the 50s and once again with some monumental finds only recently. Thus, in the following, I wish to explore the heart of the Jewish quarter of Cologne through 5 languages medieval Jews used to describe it: Hebrew, Aramaic, Latin, German, and French. Cologne's properties are one of the most, if not the most, documented from the Middle Ages. The different parishes in Cologne kept records of real estate transactions, purchases, inheritance, divisions, donations, pledges, and the transfer of legal rights. Sorry. Not all my slides relate exactly to what I say. The Regensburg girls are laughing because they had the opportunity to sit and see this book only recently with Eva. In these records, original deeds and charters were first kept in large chests designated to hold valuables, like relics kept in shrines. Hence, they were called Schreinsbuch. And the documents, Schreinskarten. The Jews of Cologne lived on 2 or 3 streets, all in the parish of Saint Laurent's Church, Lorenzpfarre. Not only did the parish kept record of real estate transaction the Jews performed, but at times it kept the original Hebrew deed, the shtar, or testimony attached to the Latin summary. Thus, alongside Latin entries reporting in brief paragraphs the real estate transactions undergone in the parish, we can find original Hebrew testimonies reporting transactions of inheritance sewed to the margin of the book. At times these are accompanied by parallel Latin entries, but at times they are independent. Though there are witnesses signed at the bottom of most of the Hebrew documents, these were probably not the original deeds, but letters of attestation drawn down by the Jewish community officials testifying to the transactions. Even in cases where it seems as an original deed of sale, we can assume that it was only a copy. This could be deducted not only from the need of both sides of the transaction to possess an original deed, but also from some of the Hebrew documents stating that they were written down to be kept as proof of sale at St. Laurent's Church. So I mentioned here you have the Latin attestation saying the same thing. And some of the Latin entries state the same out loud as well. In one case it is stated that transaction itself was done in front of the priors. This is not the example. We should imagine that first the Jews reported their real estate transaction voluntarily and sporadically. Only with the standardization and the involvement of urban bureaucracy did it turn into a common practice. We have deeds from the early 13th century, but mainly from the 14th century, most of them. From these documents, we could reconstruct exactly the structure of the Jewish quarter and the history of its houses, as done by Cologne rabbi and historian Adolf Kobel, and more recently by Matthias Schmandt. The Jewish quarter was burnt to the ground in the aftermath of the riots of 1349. And though some Jewish families returned to inhabit Cologne, this was the end of the most ancient Jewish community in Germany. With time, a new Christian quarter was erected where the old Jewish one resided. Though through the tragic, some would say ironic, fact that the city was heavily bombarded during the Second World War, the center of town was leveled down, allowing the archaeological excavations that were led in the 50s by Otto Doppelfeld, and again recently by Sven Schotte. These excavations collaborate the evidence we have from the real estate register and deeds, and I don't need to elaborate about this, everybody knows the town now. Turning to the language of these documents, we note straight away that while the priors at the monastery wrote the entries of the Schreinsbuch in Latin, the Jews paralleled them with Hebrew, thus affirming the equation between the two sacred and official languages. It also affirms the status of one language among the other social group. Jews seek to have their transactions transcribed in Latin as a safe language of medieval bureaucracy and real estate possession. On the other hand, Hebrew is accepted as proof of sale and may officially represent the Jews within the Latin space or sphere. But these are not the only two languages presented in these deeds. Yet another language, or even two, hide between the official Latin and Hebrew, the German. Many German words are scattered within the Latin register, sometime in a Latinized form. The same goes to the Hebrew. The Hebrew documents are riddled with German words transcribed into Hebrew letters, and thus known as Judeo-German. These words are mainly toponyms, names of places, houses, streets, plazas, or institutions such as the palace, bakery, or communal house, and these are several examples. On the one hand, the fact that German is shared, or even crosses over from the Latin to the Hebrew documents, points that it was the shared language and the main point of interaction between Jews and Christians. On the other hand, once written down into Hebrew letters, they were no longer accessible to a Christian audience, and thus no longer served as a bridge between cultures. This is why we should count them as two languages, the vernacular German and the Judeo-German. In a way, we must say that the divide, or the hostility between the two cultures, parallels the divide between oral and written. Differently put, in a mainly oral culture, the putting of culture down into writing accents the severe and alienating aspects of said culture, rather than serve as an invitation for dialogue or awareness of the other, as it might happen in modern times. Not all four languages appear in every document, but it is very rare to find a document without at least two of them. Though it might present some mythological problems, we may combine all the documents together in order to see how these languages work together, or even once against the other, in portraying the Jewish urban space. The most interesting incidents are where the different languages are interchangeable, meaning they point to the same locus or object. In some of these cases, it becomes even more significant through the fact that they translate each other rather than transliterate. The following table presents some major examples of the relations between the four languages. Through the relations between these languages, we could construct the relation between Jews and non-Jews in medieval Cologne, a project which I'm undergoing at the moment, and I will return to this towards the end of my talk. But these are not the only medieval Jewish sources from Cologne using several languages. Legal writings in other Jewish texts use a melange of languages as well. For example, around, and this is a text I worked on and some of you know very well as well, around the year 1200, a Jewish rabbi, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yoel HaLevi, mentioned yesterday by Ephraim, described in his Laws of Eruv the Jewish quarter of Cologne. And in Cologne there is such a case where the Mavoi goes from the idolatry called Marportze to the cordonnier who mend shoes. And there is a small Mavoi that intersects the big one. And they should construct as I wrote, and it is allowed to all Israel. Rabbi Eliezer describes the street, which he calls Mavoi in Aramaic, that runs from the shrine at Marzforten to the shoemaker's market. This Mavoi is joined with a smaller Mavoi, which at its other end opens to the public space. Through examination of the constructed Jewish quarter, we see that the large Mavoi, referred to by Rabbi Eliezer the Judengasse, running from the shrine at the Marzplatten to the gate of the gate of St. Martin in the south, to the Bagmaker alley, Untertaschenmacher, in the north. This street is joined by a small, narrow street, the Engegasse, running from the west towards the Judengasse, which Rabbi Eliezer calls the small Mavoi. And this is from Sven Schotte's reconstruction recently. The prior map was from Kober's book. Coming back to the question of languages, we see that Rabbi Eliezer, somewhat similar to the Hebrew deeds examined above, uses Hebrew with vernacular toponyms and words in the mix. Nevertheless, 3 points are very much different. First, his Hebrew is Rabbinic Hebrew, that is mixed with much Aramaic and following the wording of the Talmud. This language serves as a professional jargon among the rabbinic elite. But this choice of language goes beyond this, as we will see below. Second, in addition to Middle High German, to Middle Hochdeutsch, he uses Old French as well. Last, his spelling in Hebrew letters of the German words is different than the convention found in the Hebrew deeds. This is I didn't brought the Martuta. This is in the deeds. This is how Marzporten is written, and this is how he does it, Marzporten, which is exactly similar to the German writing at the time. What is most striking is the different selection of languages within the Jewish community, between Rabbi Eliezer's legal writing and the deeds, apparently representing different social strata. The Hebrew deeds and testimonies preserved in the Judenschreinsbuch use a rich biblical Hebrew, while Rabbi Eliezer chooses rabbinic Talmudic Hebrew and Aramaic. His decision to use Talmudic terminology was not accidental or derived from the lack of different Hebrew words. Thus, Rabbi Eliezer's use of the term Mavoi is contrasted in the deeds with street, Reḥov, and more rarely with path, street. While the deeds translate or transliterated the street names Judengasse and Engegasse, he uses the Talmudic Mavoi. The deeds also provide at least 2 Hebrew terms to describe an intersection, a corner and a crossroads, Keren Zavit and Parashat Drachim. Whereas Rabbi Eliezer uses verbal acrobatic to signify the same, a large Mavoi, long and open from both ends, and in the middle it is entered by a small one, etc. Thus, it is clear that Rabbi Eliezer's choice of vocabulary represents an imaginary cartography, to use Dan Smale's term, that is used to impose Talmudic geography upon a medieval reality. Furthermore, the way he chooses to talk about space reinforces the Talmudic notion of a separate Jewish space, the Eruv, which also coincides precisely with the actual space medieval Jews inhabited, as I have demonstrated elsewhere. But the Hebrew language in the deeds is not neutral either. It represents yet another additional imaginary cartography, that of deeds, property, and real estates. and the social strata of the Cologne merchants, a point which Ephraim touched upon yesterday. These merchants assert their place in the Christian city by juxtaposition the Latin with biblical Hebrew, and aligning themselves alongside their Christian neighbors along the oral written diglosa. To sum up, the medieval Jews of Cologne used 5 languages to describe the same space. Rabbinic mix of Hebrew and Aramaic, the legal Hebrew of the deeds, Latin, medieval German, and medieval French. Each of these languages represents a different set of aims, mentality, perceptions of space, and points to different types of relations with non-Jews and other Jews. Nevertheless, the one commonality among them is that each one, in a different manner, creates a distinguished Jewish space. Rabbi Eliezer's rabbinic melange of Hebrew and Aramaic creates a Talmudic defined closed space suitable for the laws of Shabbat. The Hebrew of the deeds parallels, literally, sewed on the side, the Latin of the Christians, and thus represents a parallel system of real estates with its own history and laws, but one that is contained within the pages of the Christian one. But even Jewish use of the vernacular languages, paradoxically, points to the same separation from the non-Jewish world. The use of French among Jews of the Rhineland up to the 14th century is well attested in the sources. Thus, in the German context of the Rhineland, French among the Jews should be regarded as a private Jewish language. Even the Middle High German, the Middle Hochdeutsch, a spoken language, an oral language, common to Jews and non-Jews in the Rhineland, when used to describe space, is accessible only to Jews because it is transliterated into Hebrew letters. Thus, though these languages represent different Jewish social strata and different interactions between Jews and non-Jews, they all transform the space they are describing into a Jewish space, integrated or contained in the Christian space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speaker of the first session of the Jews in the city is Dr. Rainer Barzen from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Rainer Josef Barzen was trained at Berlin, Jerusalem, and Trier, and is specialized in the history of Jews in Central Europe in the Middle Ages. And now he was a fellow of Martin Buber Society at the Hebrew University until the last year, and now he's a research fellow at the Center of the Study of Conversion at Ben-Gurion University in Beersheba. And of course, we are all waiting to his book, which is going to be published at the Momenta Germania Historia. The book is talking about the Takanot or Kehilot of Shum, and I'm invite Dr. Rainer to talk about Medinat Magenza as a Jewish neighborhood and a Jewish urban center between topography and geography.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much for this kind introduction and also for, especially for this invitation to this conference. Yes, when I saw the first draft of the program of this conference and also that a couple of people, at least 2 people, want to speak about Cologne, I had first of all the idea also now to speak about the other center, or at least from my own perspective about the center of the Rhineland, about Magenza. And when I started to think about it, then I was asking myself, how can I show something which is not there anymore? Which is also a problem when you're visiting the places, when you go to Cologne or you go to Speyer and you go to to Worms, and nobody is going to Mainz because the comment is always the same, there is nothing there. Which is especially painful in regard to the significance of this Jewish community, because since the High Middle Ages, it had been one of the most important communities, as I said already, and it is at least we mustn't forget this. The community, starting from Gershom or Hagula and ending Moshe Mintz and Maharil and also Jakob Weil. And unlike in Speyer and in Worms, none of this is visible in the city center of today. And for this reason, I would like now to try in this presentation to compare in contrast the visible presence of the aforementioned Jewish communities of Cologne, Worms, and Speyer with the visible presence of the community of Mainz, in connected to the history of the city of Mainz, and I will do this within the framework of the known and reconstructed topography of the historical ground plan of the city. You hear me like that? I obviously have these confusions here. It's right like that if I'm speaking? Lower? Is this better?
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you.
Just tell me if you can't understand me. Well, the beginning of the Jewish community in Mainz goes back to the 10th century, as we know all. Research and the traditional transmission on the community of Mainz emphasis especially the presence of a scholarly personality that had a determining influence on halachic developments and the nature of Ashkenazi Judaism. So for the narrative of Ashkenazi Jews in the Italian diaspora of the 15th and 16th century, it is a matter of course, as Lucia Raspe showed us in her research, that Mainz was considered to be the mother community, a symbol for Ashkenaz. The fact that Mainz is probably not the oldest community in Ashkenaz, rather than Cologne, as the latest excavations have definitely shown, it is in no way detrimental to this projection of Mainz as the place of the origin of Ashkenazi culture. Rather, since the 12th century at the latest, it has been based on the traditional transmission of the Kalonymus family. This form of the family tree, or at least this text, what you can see here and read as well, that was established by Eliezer of Worms, Harokeach, shows two things. It emphasizes the inner Jewish context and justifies the major role of the Kalonymus family through its parentage. At the same time, Harokeach emphasizes the central role of the community of Mainz by tracing the Colomanites moved from Lucca to Mainz, back to the initiative of the German king. The fact that the historical correct king, Otto III, is not named here as the initiator, according to Dietmar of Merseburg, but rather Charlemagne, is due for the 12th century zeitgeist under Emperor Friedrich Barbarossa. Under those influence, Charlemagne was not only canonized, but also called on to legitimize the empire and the role of the Stauffer dynasty. And in our case, it is interesting enough that the Harokeach claims legitimization through Charlemagne equally for his family himself, and thus indirectly for the community of Mainz. But how are all these elements of the settlement of the Jews in Mainz and also this wonderful prosperity of the community of Mainz and its central role to be documented in the appearance within the framework of the city? The panorama of Mainz by Matthias Merian. And as you saw it in the presentation of Micha, it's the same artist, it's the same geographer, and we own him a lot because we get out of these pictures wonderful information. We have not other possibilities to get these information. Showing us first the topography of the late medieval cathedral city, like comparable panoramas of Merian of other German cities. It is outstanding. Far outstanding for its exact details. And I make here it's a little bit smaller. The synagogue, this is here, so to say, the center of it, and I hope you can see also my signs, what I made here, yeah, hopefully. The synagogue, which I signed here in blue, which has been documented since the 11th century, is located within the expanded Christian city, surrounded by its parish churches and monasteries, as well as the central institutions of civil minds. That means the city hall and the Holy Spirit Hospital. You see this down here in yellow, the civil institutions, in red, the classical institutions, and in the little blue one, you see it?
Okay.
The blue one is the synagogue, which was in this time the chapel of all saints, and so there we know exactly where this building was situated. Yeah, make this game a little bit easier. The surroundings of the synagogue can also be pictured even more clearly when we place the aforementioned institutions in the reconstructed city map by Falk. And this is the first version of this city map, shows us all the houses, the names of the houses, which makes us even now possible, because we have no other evidence to get step by step closer to what this Jewish neighborhood was all about. I'm preferring here for this presentation to use the second version, which is it is more clearer for us and gives us, without the later information, the late medieval situation of the city. Once again, the detailed map, or shall I already show this one? Is this easier? Okay, then we will go ahead with this. Here the synagogue is located in the geographical center of the walled city. It is in immediate vicinity are the parish churches St. Quentin, St. Christoph, great, St. Quentin, St. Christoph, St. Emmeran, as well as other city monasteries. We won't mention everyone here, but here are the Franciscans, and this is of course the cathedral, and here once again the civic institutions, also here the warehouse, the Kaufhaus of the city. And with all this information, this special geographic proximity of this Jewish quarter to certain institutions of the bishop city can be better understood if we turn to the beginning of Jewish settlement in Mainz around the year 1000. Yeah. No. Well, you have here, I'm sorry, all these buildings, so you get also an impression of it. Yeah, but this is now the map around the year 1000. We can recognize that unlike Cologne, the area that was walled by the Romans had hardly been expanded along the Rhine until the 19th century. So the wall that you see, this is the Roman wall. And this is not, as in Cologne, that the city is growing. While Cologne, which was much smaller than Mainz at the time of the Romans, grew continuously, medieval Mainz had to first grow to fill the medieval defining walls. The settlement core from the Carolingian period show here with its parish church St. Quentin, founded in the 8th century. The oldest parish church in the city seems almost lost in the market Roman area. We speak here about this brown area here, the dark brown area. Along with a small trading post under Archbishop Willigis, the cathedral was built as the focal point of the new bishop city with its own area of legal authority. This is here, this side here. Willigis is a decisive person who determined the rise of Mainz as the ecclesiastical but also the political center of the Holy Roman Empire, at least for his days, being of course in competition with Cologne. And it is certainly no coincidence that within the framework of this expansion of Mainz, as the Jewish community is established, that also experienced its first blossoming at the same time. You can also put it in small words. Willigis Gershom. The same persons in the same generation, maybe or maybe sure, they also know each other. Now we twisted it a little bit. This is north, this is south, this is more or less the same plane. Jewish Mainz, as the place of settlement of the Jewish community within the city walls, was established as it were between the two municipal legal entities, the Christian settlement and the bishop's city. Now you can see it more clearly, so to say, the small Christian settlement, the bishop's city, and here is the synagogue, and here is St. Quentin. While the synagogue was established only a few meters opposite of the central parish church of St. Quentin, the Jewish quarter surrounding the synagogue was located only a few meters away from the cathedral and the bishop's residence. This is where here. And the main marketplace opposite, and also only a few meters away from the harbor of the Rhine River, and from the 14th century onwards from the new marketplace center, the Kaufhaus, as I said already, in the early 14th century. While the Jewish quarter was at the edge of the existing built-up area here, forget all this light stuff, just only the dark area. With the expansion of the medieval Mainz, the Jewish quarter became the central quarter of the city, and the streets, under the modern names Schusterstrasse, Betzelstrasse, Flachsmarkt, became important centers of trade and commerce for Jews and Christians alike. And here a few pictures to make the situation a little bit more clear. When we look from the south to the north, from the cathedral towards the Schusterstrasse, that means to the synagogue, we see St. Quirin, still in ruins here. I mean, here you have the map, and here you have St. Quirin, and here you have the area of the synagogue. And this most important insula with the later on the most important institutions of the Jewish quarter. And when we do the same thing from the south, wait a minute, you have here a few pictures more. Here the insula and the other part, and here St. Quirin, and here's the cathedral. I brought these pictures out of two reasons, at least of two reasons. First of all, that you see how close it is. When you see a map, you see only a map. Then, of course, the destruction of the Second World War is also a part of this destruction of archaeological evidences. And the third reason maybe is because you see this road so beautifully. So what you see on the map, you can also see in this stage of the city destruction and cleaning up, where these roads and lanes still in the same form, the same medieval form, have been situated. What do we have here? Yeah, and this is the modern situation with this. It's Kaufhof. What is it? Yeah. Kaufhof on the former remains of synagogue, hospital, and other Jewish institutions. Why it is like that, I will mention it later. Yeah, and once again, the destroyed part here from the north to the south. You see as well the same thing. I tried to illustrate this with pictures of the early 20th century, not because it is medieval, by the way. I'm very sure that in these old houses there have been also there was also a rest of medieval architecture, but to give you also an impression how these lanes have been look like, as small lanes, and also this perspective to the cathedral in this distance, and also this closeness of this former Jewish quarter and the political and ecclesiastical center of high medieval Cologne. Well, and this is how it looks today. Okay. The fact that the Jewish residential quarter was not isolated from the other streets where Christians lived may also explain why in neither Hebrew medieval writings nor in the nor in the chronicles, chronicle transmissions of the persecutions of 1096, there are no clear Hebrew descriptions of the Jewish quarter in Mainz, nor really a name, a term, and another way of really describing the extent of this Jewish quarter. Only the Jewish houses are mentioned, and the author only gives an idea of this closeness to the bishop's palace. I have here this Hebrew quotation. I give you also a medieval house, how a medieval house looked like. This is the Haus zum Stein, a house of the 12th century which remained in Mainz. The same thing we have here with another quotation. This is in this letter collection of the Rokeach of 1188, when there is for the first time, at least as I know, first mentioned Reḥov Yehudim and also Berechobotenu. And Eliezer also mentioned this our streets, a term that leads to the assumption that of an expansion of the Jewish quarter into several streets, which can also be confirmed, at least from the 14th century onwards, the sources what we have. And and now we're coming to the synagogue. The chronicle transmission of 1096, as well as of 1188, mentions the synagogue of Mainz as the central location of various episodes of this of transmitted events. Eliezer of Worms described in 1188 the Bima, the place from which the Torah is read, as a wooden tower, and in this way divulges something about the furnishing and of this Jewish prayer house. The building of the medieval synagogue of Mainz no longer exists, and as I said, this is this Merian stuff. This is the only picture that I can show of this building, at least for now. And when this Tietz department store was built in 1908, extensive constructions work was carried out in one of the most important parts of the Jewish quarter of Mainz. And during the reconstruction work of World War II, further extensive excavations, no archaeological excavations have been made. And this is also the reason why I'm quite sure that there is nothing, we can nothing expect here of any rests of the synagogues. I hope very much that I'm wrong, but this is how I see in the moment the situation. But we are luckily enough however, during the first construction work around 1900, these three medieval synagogue inscriptions could be recovered, and these inscriptions are of the kind used for donors, which related something about the amount and the background of the donors, as well as of the circumstances of the construction. This is the original also still exists, but in this I couldn't find the photo, so we have here only this whatever. The oldest of this preserved inscription is dated 1271 and documents the reconstruction of, or when we call it the rebuilding, the new building of the synagogue, which was first documented in 1093. The synagogue was, according to a tombstone, destroyed and damaged by fire in 1282. So the other two inscriptions, what I will present you now, are describing a little bit of the reconstruction work of this synagogue. This is the first example. I think this is easier to read. The second inscription reports on the reconstruction of repair of the doors and the roof, and it also relates to the synagogue in Mainz, like the one in Speyer and Worms, containing that this building contained two separate prayer halls, one for men and one for women, the Anashim ule Nashim. And the third one, finally, it gives us a report of the replacement of the floor, a new floor this synagogue will get also in the mid-80s of the 13th century. interesting enough, we have inscriptions also in Worms. We have also one in Oppenheim. I think this deserves a separate research about this form of inscription. While the location of the Mainz Jewish quarter can be fixed clearly in the old city of Mainz through the location of the synagogue, the question of extension of the Jewish quarter over the century from the early 10th century to the late medieval community is more difficult. We know really practical nothing about Jewish houses ownership from the 11th to the 12th century, and we know only about two houses, and this is one example which research thought that you knew a little bit more about it. This is the so-called Kalonimus house, which is close to the Reichsklarenkloster. I'll show you later on the map where this is. And we have another example, 5 minutes? Okay. About these findings of the so-called Schatz der Kaiserin Agnes. Jewelry found, which is before 1096. And so there are theories about a connection between Jews and the German king or whatever. But what is more important here is, and now I'm coming here to the core of the whole presentation, is what we call in Mainz the phenomena of the so-called Judenerben. We have here a special status of houses in Mainz from the 13th century onwards, houses who've been left behind by Jews and became owned by the city and been administrated and rented out by the city. And so, because we know that these houses have been owned by Jews, first of all started in 1285, connected to this parasha, Meir of Rothenburg. Meir is leaving Germany, and also Jews from Mainz are following him and leaving their houses behind, and then also in these killings and murderings in the midst of the 14th century, which is creating in Mainz at least a collection of, let's say, 50 houses which stay in the ownership of the cities, but can be rented also by the new Jewish community, and they're doing it. And so we have this continuity of houses. When we put this information on a map, and this I tried here once again, and I'll show you in a minute, so to say, the inner part of the map. We have also to say that the situation is much different to the Cologne situation, because these black lines here are the frontiers of the parishes. We can so say this blue stuff are the houses where we really know that there are Jewish houses, at least till the midst of the 14th century, and there are not in one parish. So the special relation like we have in Cologne between one parish and the Jewish community is even theoretically not the case, and I show you here the heart here of the whole thing. Everything what is blue is is so to say Jewish houses till the Black Death, and you have here the center of the city. According to these lists, we also know about a mikveh, which was here. We know about a shraneh, so to say, a butchery shop, a kosher butchery shop, which was more or less here in the midst. And also about a Tanzhaus, so I'm afraid I have to still search this house. But you see also here in yellow this commercial stuff. And to come to the urban center, I make here in 2 sentences my conclusion in that way, because I have to finish. When we really represent this Jewish quarter, the Jewish quarter of Mainz, but also of other cities, first of all as a Jewish quarter within the framework of a Christian city, of a Christian cathedral city, these cities, and therefore I like to take the term Medinat, first of all the term of the sources, but what this term really means. The hierarchy of Jewish settlements here, Medinat Mainz, shows us that this Jewish quarter is also an urban city, in the meaning that the whole Jewish infrastructure is not only for the city itself, but for a framework which is very clear defined smaller settlements were connected to the larger community. In other words, a community in Hebrew terms is not only Ir, Kehila, Zot lo Ir, Rak Ir, Zegam Medina, it's also a region. And in the case of Mainz, it is quite small. In other cases, it is much bigger. In Cologne, it is also much bigger. And what makes this thing so fascinating as well, I have here a documentation, an original from the 30s of the 14th century. The bishop, or here the Landesherr, so to say, the political leader of the political territory of the Archbishopric of Mainz, which is settling here two French refugee families from the Jewish refugee from France, they, knowing all these interconnections, and these Jews have, of course, to promise that they won't leave their places, they won't leave Eltville and Bingen. These are the places they are allowed to live. And if, chas v'shalom, if they're really doing it, they have to pay, and all this, or what is their own will come to the bishop. And to make the threat even stronger, they have also to take the cherem shel kehilot shum on them. So to say, the bishop accepting their Jewish loyalties, not even accepting it, they know these loyalties and they using it. And so to say, as the last sentence and also as a sikum, as a conclusion, we see here that such a Jewish quarter, as I tried to show and to reconstruct for Mainz, has, so to say, two, and in this case, three dimensions. A Jewish quarter, an urban center in a larger surrounding, and for Mainz, and therefore I took here this famous quotation, Magen v'tzin'ah, this spiritual, intellectual, and emotional leading role, not only for the area, but also for the whole German Ashkenazi Jewish community. Thank you.
Well, may I ask you to sit here and open the floor to your questions? Yes. Sorry.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Start.
I have a question regarding Cologne. You were showing that they developed a kind of bureaucratic language to use in this kind of transactions. So what I was wondering about is the earlier not the Judenschreinsbuch, but the Judenschreinskarten, the charters which they used at the beginning. And as far as I remember, there are also charters from other parishes than the one which is the one where the Jewish quarter actually is in, St. Laurens. So what I was wondering about is whether you can see the same kind of bureaucratic language in the other parishes as well, or whether there is a different development in St. Laurens because there were so many transactions and which would show a development of bureaucratic transaction and forms which were used in every case.
So, as you know, most of them were, the Latin texts were from other parishes were published. We could go over them and see them in huge volumes in the 19th century. This is very standard Latin forms. They become shorter in a way. More and more shorter. They become from original, let's say, registers of original deeds. They become very short paragraphs of notary. Comes from, let's say, from an archive, it becomes a notary that just asserts them. And this is a place where we have to put these two histories, the Latin and the Hebrew deeds, on a larger scale. you have to follow the rise of bureaucracy in Germany in regard of what happens in France before, and in regard of what happened before that in Norman England, and it could point a line of the evolution of bureaucracy until it goes over to German with the sources that you deal. With the Latins, you could see the evolution, how it goes. The whole starts with Doomsday Book somewhere in 1066. The Hebrew has a more complicated history because it has the Aramaic deeds, and here we have Hebrew ones, and you could follow also the evolution from Talmudic time through the books in Spain, in Barcelona, in the 10th century, 11th century, the English charters, very few French ones we have, and then the Hebrew ones from Cologne, and later on in Vienna and other. So it is an evolving genre that is embedded with the rise of the state, the modern bureaucracy. And the larger picture is how the accumulation of deeds, of copies of deeds, turns into a registry, a municipal registry of writing everything down.
Thank you. Professor Schatzmiller.
Yeah, never mind.
Ciao.
Did you ever meet the term migrash? Migrash, mem gimel resh shin, in your documents, Micha.
I don't recall, but it sounds familiar. I'm going through the Spanish, the English, and the French deeds, and I think that in England you haven't got this. We should ask Judith Schlange will show you. These ones, the Cologne ones, have a very good index. In the 1888 first volume of the
Yeah, okay.
that's a very good volume. I don't recall Migrash over there. No.
Yeah, because you are not the only one who has difficulties with it. Malachi Betarier called me and asked me whether I know what Migrash is. And it occurred to me, but I'm just shooting from the hip, I really don't know, that Platea could be Migrash. You had Platea.
We had
Platea.
Platea. Platea usually means more a street than a field. But do you have something else to designating a field?
Where did you find it? Where did you find it's written, Migrash? Why did you ask the question?
Malachi asked.
Oh, I found it, I saw it a million times. Tu dazon asta b'migrash Perpignan. It is true that I found it mostly in Spanish, or in, but what really it means migrash, then we don't know. We know what it means today. I mean, this whole country is a country of migrashim. Everybody is making money here of migrashim. But this is not
the Latin terminology isn't very fixed as well. You have very strange Latin terms here. I don't know if you saw the Konoviki, at the corner of a street, which I haven't found in any Latin sources. Such a form. You have all kind of very strange Latin forms.
You know, time collecting all this stuff. Now I have a small remark to Rainer. Medinat. You made a point of it. By the way, I have seen in Trier, you weren't there, 3 obligations of Jews not to leave the...
This is one of them. This is one of them.
Yeah,
This is one of them.
Yeah, but they were, at any event, I should tell you that in Sefer Hasidim, the Jews are taking the oath not to leave the country, not to leave wherever they are. Medina could, you want it to be bigger than a city. but in Arabic at least, Medina is simply a city.
This is, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
This is right. When I started this research years ago, not only alone, it was still in Trier, we first of all saw that Medinat, and this I didn't mention here, connected to Kehillah, is, so to say, the Kehillah is the central place where this cemetery is situated. So Yishuv is only a Yishuv, but the Kehillah is a place where a cemetery is situated. And I have also, what I didn't show you here today, this beautiful remark, it's of the late 14th century out of a ketubah, where they say you have to write Medina if this place has a tehom. For me, if this place has a dome.
Yeah.
And so we coming together, so to say, because what I said about Medina, you can first of all also say about Kehillah in my regional research. Places, Kehillah, a place is only a Kehillah when it has a cemetery, and then if it has a cemetery, there is a tendency to build such a framework. But Medina, and because this term is also used in the early modern period for Landjudenschaft, you have then also, at least from the 14th century onwards, in my lists also in Memo Book of Deutsch also as well, the tendency to use Medina as well when you have not only this old stuff, what we have here, an old settlement in a very old city, but you have also an organization of Jews in a political unit. And then you have Medinat Hessen and Medinat Meißen. But you have as well Medinat Bodensee. And Medinat Bodensee is not a political unit at all. It's maybe the heart of the bishopric of Konstanz, but as you know very well, this is much complicated, and the cemetery is in Überlingen and not in Konstanz and all this stuff. So Medina is of course not a one-dimensional term, but in all these cases, Medina has an implication of territory, of region, of Ezol, and not only of place, of ear. And therefore I said in Hebrew, a community is not only an urban place, it's the urban place, it's for me the urban center of something which is bigger.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Thanks. I also have a question for Micha. I was wondering, you wrote in your charts that one of your columns was about Middle High German. I was wondering whether you're really sure there's Middle High German.
No.
No?
Just the cut is because of the periodically, according to the period. Because until 1300 I define it as Middle High German.
Yeah, but I think in your in the Hebrew letters of the Judeo-German transcriptions, you could really see that it's either Low German or Ripuarian. They have like Lude instead of Liute, and they don't have
diphthong.
Yeah, they don't have diphthongs, but they have these Dehnungslaute, and I found it really funny to see. And I'm not a philologist either, but whenever I say something about Cologne, these German philology people jump down my throat and say, it's not, it is Ripuarian, it is Low German or Low Dutch or something. And especially with the Hebrew transcriptions, I think it was really easy to see this.
So,
that they spoke it in Low German and that they transcribed the Low German forms.
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll check it again. I will, really automatically. I said because of the time period. Yeah. That's all. Like I said, Old French, and it could be Champagne, it could be other things, depending from where. The transliteration into Hebrew letters is a fascinating question that I want to deal with. And till now, everybody are persuaded that this represents the way people spoke.
Yes.
I'm not sure. No. I think they had a system of transliteration, and you could see it through all kinds of vowels and things that they didn't pronounce for sure. And you could see that. For example, when I'll give you from a French charter, when they write Guillaume, with two lamed, with two L's. There's no reason phonetically to do that. Only if you transliterate what you could see in the words, the way it's written.
Latin.
And I'm collecting these kind
Latin, yeah.
these kind of examples to state the case that maybe it's not representative of how they spoke only. And you see, for example, the best case here is this Malzporze, the St. Martin gate, at the same period. The deeds write Maltuta, while Rabbi Eliezer Bon writes Malporze, which is exactly how it's written in German in the Latin source. We have it in Latinized letters. So where did Maltuta come from? I don't know. What it represents, is it a pronunciation or not? Who represents? This is a very good question, and people took it as granted that this is how people spoke. And Hebrew, the earliest French we have is in the Rashi Lazim, the Rashi glosses, and it represents the way he talked. I'm not sure. I'm collecting evidence to state the case otherwise. We'll see. But I'll check with philologists. You know.
Yes, Nomi. Okay.
I have to expose my ignorance since we're a small crowd. I have a question to Yitzchak. There is a prayer that I have, the name of it eludes me, and I have no idea when it was composed, but it is uttered by the Chazan before Kol Nidrei. And one of the verses there says, Ve'kolon la'eh. And I'm thinking maybe in a way to connect it to Kathleen's presentation of yesterday, where she was showing that in a way we're trying to open the gates of heaven by some sort of a deed. Could that be some sort of a connection?
Before Musaf, not before Kol Nidrei.
Is
Excellent.
it before Musaf?
Yeh Ratzon,
Yeah.
before Musaf. Excellent.
Right, exactly.
Before Musaf, before
And
the
I think
Kaddish.
it's in a way a plea to opening the gates of prayer. I, as the representative of the community.
Firkona, yeah.
No, but he says that
Exactly.
you should have a big beard and nice, and I'm not.
Right.
That's what
No, but
Yeah,
the
but
should is
That's
that
true.
should.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the aspiration
Great.
towards. And
Well, thank you.
I have a
Sorry,
remark
I want
concerning
to-
this.
Please.
There's one source I thought about during your beautiful presentation, your very aesthetic presentation, was from the Jewish-Christian disputation. I don't remember if it's with Rabbi Yosef Amkaneh or Nitzachon Yashan, where the Jews say, the Christians tell us that we are ugly.
Yosef Amkaneh.
Yosef Amkaneh? There's also Judeo-French over there and German and all kinds of things. And they accept the claim. The Jew says, yes, we're ugly, but it's because we're from pure origin and we
It's in the Hebrew text, yes.
We are like
Thank you.
the prune.
Yeah.
But you said that
Flus.
it's Ashkenazic attitudes. Can you give us a brief answer to compare to what? To compare to Spanish?
Yeah, my
Jews-
comparison, I didn't present it here, but my comparison was mainly with Spain, and you see much more expressions of beauty in Spain than in Ashkenaz. I was struck. I mean, I love and have zealothy for Ashkenaz, and I would love to see more aesthetic in Ashkenaz. Unfortunately, thank you.
Yes, please. The last one. Yeah.
If anybody else doesn't have anything to say, I would like just to say something about the whole idea of the Jewish quarter. We have a beautiful documentation for the city of Norwich in England. You spell Norwich with a W. We Englishmen, we pronounce Norwich. Beautiful documentation, house near house, and who lives where. And a certain scholar who wrote a book about Jews of Norwich did it. And we see there the sociology of the settlement. Namely, that the very rich, successful Jews live out of it. They don't want to live with the others. which reminds me very much of the city, my beloved city, Toronto in Canada. We have there a Jewish quarter, but the rich Jews don't live there.
May I?
Thank you. Yeah, please.
But what you're saying, what you're saying here, it connects, or it reminds me what I had here on my map, because there are a small number of houses which are far away, which are at the economical center of the Christians, or on the other side. So there is a core, and there are people who decided differently out of many reasons.
Yeah. The last note, remarks.
Just a very brief note, the same holds true for Frankfurt. I mean, there is a Judengasse, but there are many Jews living outside the Judengasse.
So this is a phenomenon of the Jews, like here in Arsuf, or Tel Aviv and Arsuf. Thank you all for a very interesting session. We are going now to eat and coming back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much.